Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of Dispatches. I'm your host, Brady Kreitzer. Our guest today is Journal of the American Revolution contributor Mike Adelberg, and he'll be discussing the Monmouth County Jail, the interesting revolutionary history that goes along with it, and the history of jails during the American Revolution overall. Mike, thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure, Brady. Thanks so much for having me.
So, Mike, you're a first time guest. Tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up on the Jersey Shore in Monmouth County, New Jersey, which is where so much of my research has been focused. I have a master's degree from Rutgers in history and spent several years uh, teaching community college history and working at the Monmouth County Historical Association. Then for the last 35 years, I've been researching the Revolutionary War, particularly the local issues and uh, everyday life for everyday people during a really difficult time period. And I've just had all kinds of fun with it. It's been just a great lifelong interest of mine.
Yeah, so, Mike, what drew your interest originally into this particular topic?
Yeah, while doing research for a prior book, The Revolutionary War in Monmouth County, I came upon the story of the murder of a loyalist, James Pugh. And James Pugh was not a particularly violent man, as best we can tell. He was involved in illegally trading between the British on Staten Island and Sandy Hook and people in Middletown, New Jersey. He was did it for a while. Did get caught while visiting his family, and was brought to the county jail in Freehold. And this would be late 1778. And while in the jail, he was murdered by the prison sentry, a man named James Tilley. And not only was the murder interesting, but Tilley is sort of whisked away and ceases to exist in the county after this incident. He's probably moved inland for safety and to avoid loyalist retribution. And the incident was very interesting and well documented, but it did get me thinking that much more about what else went on in this jail. This was, Monmouth County was a farm county. The jail was a modest endeavor. And suddenly the jail not only has the James Pews of the world, but all sorts of very dangerous loyalist, um, insurrectionists, and frankly, villains of different types, robbers, murderers. And the jail's not really set up to handle that kind of traffic.
So, Mike, New Jersey has such a difficult revolutionary history, partisan and very personal for a lot of loyalists and patriots. Tell us about the need for jails, because we think of them, of course, as penal, right, for criminals, but there was a really intense political element to this.
Yeah, absolutely. So there would have been a time before the the revolution where jails swelled with people to be detained immediately before courts. And so people were brought in who maybe committed assault or were involved in riot and trespass charges, relatively felonies and relatively severe charges. And so these people were brought in, they were held for a period of time. And because the penalties were often not especially severe, the thought that there might be a mass jailbreak or the thought that there might be a band of partisans who would try to break into the jail and free their kin, it just wasn't really part of the calculus. So these jails could exist as very modest amateur enterprises. And then in counties like Monmouth County, during the war, exactly as you said, Brady, these jails now hold dangerous people with blood on their hands, and at times quite a bit of them. But the jail itself has not been improved. So these jails are permeable. They are guarded sometimes by militia, but sometimes not. And the jail keeper and the sentries are frequently not up to the task, and certainly weren't up to the task in Monmouth County a good deal of the time.
Mike, when I think of a jail in this time period, I think about Colonial Williamsburg. There's certainly examples like that. Could you tell us a little bit about Monmouth County Jail? Is there anything left to see? What would it look like? Give us maybe a description of it.
Yeah, so what we do not have a single document that really narrates what the jail looked like, but there are documents that tell us little pieces about the Monmouth County Jail, and then there are other farm county jails that are described in more detail, and we can guess that the Monmouth County Jail probably shared characteristics with those other jails. So piecing it together, we can assume what we know is that it was in the basement of the county courthouse. It consisted of a few rooms. It would have had basement level windows. So there is fresh air uh, able to get into the jail. Um, and there are at times bars on the windows. But we also know that people get out of the jail by likely going through the windows. So we can assume that for enterprising people, these bars are not above being compromised. And we know that the Monmouth County Jail had doors with wicket holes in them. We know this because the sentry James Tilley was able to get the barrel of a gun into the cell when he murdered James Pugh. So we know that the doors were likely heavy, but they did have a hole in them so that the sentry could look in on the prisoners.
Mike, we know that in early America, not all jails are created equal. From your research, was there anything particularly notable about the Monmouth County Jail? Did it have a reputation for being a difficult place, or was it sort of a run of the mill operation, I guess we could say, in New Jersey?
Yeah, it's a really good question. So first of all, we know that Monmouth County was not the only county jail that had problems. Non-exhaustive research on this, we know that there were problems in the Burlington County Jail, the Cumberland County Jail, the Sussex County Jail, and I suspect with exhaustive research we'd find out more instances than just the ones I listed. Um, what we also know is that these county jails differed a great deal from prisoner of war detention areas. For example, Easton, Pennsylvania, Lancaster, Pennsylvania, uh, Frederick, Maryland, Leesburg, Virginia. All of these were sites of large jails that held prisoners of war. And these jails included both indoor and outdoor facilities, whereas these county jails in New Jersey were exclusively indoor and quite cramped when they were holding a lot of people.
So, Mike, let's get to the heart of your article. We're going to see a pretty serious event go down in 1781, a jailbreak. Set that up for us a little bit. Who's involved? Who's planning this? Give us the kind of right, as an author, give us that introductory chapter.
Yeah. So first, what we know is that there had been escapes from the jail previous to 1781, but they seem to have been more isolated, maybe a single person getting out types of escapes. We know that there was one in 1777. We know that there was a petition where the county leaders refer to other escapes. But the sense here is that these were individuals who escaped. What makes the jailbreak of February 1781 different is, first of all, we know that the ranks of people in the jail swelled. It swelled in December 1780 when the militia did a large campaign along the shore and swept up people who were illegally trading with the British. And so you have dozens of people coming into this jail. It must have been very, very cramped and filled with loyalists. And at the same time, leaders in Monmouth County knew they had a problem. The Chief Justice of New Jersey, David Brearley, writes that he worries that the Loyalists will come and attempt to break open the jail. The county clerk, Kenneth Anderson, worries about it in a letter. And the senior-most military officer in the county, Colonel David Foreman, actually claims to have detected a conspiracy among the prisoners and puts some of the prisoners in irons. So this is not an unexpected event when it occurs. But when it does occur, we know that four of the escapees are named. They are Humphrey Wade, Joel Parker, Robert James, and an African American man who only apparently carries one name, named DeKnight. And we know that others escape in addition to those four, but those are the four who are named in documents. And then three of the escapees commit a robbery the next day. At least three of the escapees are quickly captured and are hanged on January 8th.
Um, so, Mike, what does a jailbreak look like in that situation? So we have a prison underneath a very legitimate government building, right? The county courthouse. This is not like an Old West style jailbreak, I'm guessing. So, do we know the particulars? Is this more of a slipping out in the night, or is this sort of a kind of a shoot 'em up escape?
Yeah, it's probably more the former than the latter, but we don't unfortunately have that thrilling narrative document which explains exactly how these men got out. The most likely escape route would have been through a window, and the window would have been uh, pried open one way or another. Some number of escapees get out, and probably at night. It's a while before there is a discovery made, and we know that again, the fact that just the next day, three of these men commit an armed robbery, we know that there probably was some communication with kin or friendlies on the outside who received these people and were able to put them in decent clothes and arm them.
Mm-mm. So, in your article, Mike, you talk about the 1781 jailbreak. You then move into 1782, which is not a quiet year. You know, we think 81 Yorktown on the East Coast, things settle down. That's not really the case. Could you tell us about the year 1782?
Yeah, so first of all, I'm really glad you characterize it that way, Brady, because the commonly taught narrative is that the Revolutionary War ends at Yorktown, but on the Jersey Shore, it absolutely does not. 1782 is a very violent year. And in 1782, we have first and at least one more violent loyalist escape. His name is Tilton. He escapes early in the year. Later in the year, arguably the most notorious loyalist remaining in New Jersey, a man named John Bacon, also the subject of Journal of American Revolution article, by the way. Bacon is captured and escapes in late 1782. And we have other cases of, frankly, just bad conduct, where a loyalist being detained in the jail, a man named Peter Stout, who has a mother who owns land that had been confiscated and sold at auction, but Peter Stout apparently retains claim to it. He is extorted by the county sheriff, according to his narrative. He's extorted into renouncing his claim to his mother's estate in exchange for being released and allowed to go to New York as a refugee. Now that's his side of the story, but uh, it does create texture on the small town rivalry and arguably the small town corruption that does go on in these war torn areas. The other thing I'll note about 1782 is the county jail's role in Monmouth County's single most infamous incident, which is the hanging of Captain Joshua Huddy. And there's a loyalist detained in the county jail who is very much thought of as deserving of release by the Associated Loyalists in New York. And they instruct Captain Richard Lippincott with 30 men to seek to go to Freehold and break open the county jail and release the Associated Loyalists detained there. Lippincott, however, has broad orders and chooses not to do that, but instead, perhaps because he didn't think with 30 men he could accomplish this task, or perhaps it just wasn't really his number one goal. So instead, he does hang Captain Huddy instead of seeking to liberate the prisoners. But this issue of detention of loyalists in the county jail, and particularly the loyalist prisoners with violence in their past, being confined in irons after the prison break, was seen by the loyalists in New York as an outrage, and only stoked their resentments and their bad conduct in exchange.
Mhm. Mike, could I ask you to maybe delve into some of the earlier points that you mentioned? You mentioned there was a big difference between these civilian prisons and prisoner of war camps, but in a time of war, I could see loyalists very much being treated as prisoners of war. How do you judge or gauge this system? That is to say, locking these people in civilian prisons. As you mentioned, there were violent people there. There were debtors. There were lots of just everyday criminals. Using these civilian penal apparatuses for these wartime purposes. Do you think that was effective?
Um, I think there was a lot of irregularity, and there were a lot of local officials who were good people doing the best they could,
Hmm.
but they were making it up as they went along, and they were vastly under resourced. And so mistakes were made, and there were instances of bad conduct.
Hmm.
But just circling back to the beginning of your question, there is absolutely a difference in how the local officials understood things between a prisoner of war who is someone who is essentially in the uniform of the enemy, engaged in a military activity, and a they used various words for these people, but we'll use a more charitable word, a partisan. A partisan dressed as a civilian, acting at night, acting in a small group, and engaged in activities that may have had a military component, such as carrying off livestock to feed the army, but to the people who've just been robbed of their livestock, it's seen as robbery. And horse robbery is an especially sensitive crime in a colonial setting where you are dependent on horses to work your fields and transport you. So horse robbery was a capital offense, and probably about half of the men hanged in Monmouth County through the war were horse thieves. All other charges combined were the other half. And these people who were not in uniform were not entitled to prisoner of war protections. They were not moved to places like Easton and Frederick, Maryland. And I'm not telling you those were wonderful places. I'm sure they were not. But they were places that had clearer rules. And what goes on in these counties, war-torn counties, where there is a lot of resentment, where there is vigilante justice meted out, certainly in the second half of the war, a lot of the conduct is irregular and unexplainable from a good government perspective in the modern sense of the term.
Excellent. So, Mike, we always end this show with the same question. It gets to the heart of what we do here. How do you think your research, this article, helps us understand the Revolutionary era better?
Yeah, one of the things I find just so interesting about this time period is how hard it is in a war-torn area where the people who had experience, let's say, meting out justice, are the majority are removed, either because they become loyalists or because they get bumped into more national roles. And so the people who are in charge of something like law enforcement are making it up as they go along. And it's hard. And they don't have the resources, and they don't have the experience, and they don't have the rule book. And this doesn't just happen in Monmouth County, and it doesn't just happen with respect to the prisons. This is a case study of what local government looked like in these war-torn areas, not just in Monmouth County, but many of these war-torn areas, and not just criminal justice, but all sorts of aspects of what a local government had to do, supervising honest, violence-free, coercion-free elections, for example. The elections were a mess. The sale of Loyalist estates was a mess. Not because these were bad people. These were actually very good, very brave people. But it was just really hard. And to me, I think that's the bigger truth of this article, is that it's a little glimpse into a much larger phenomenon.
Wonderful. Well, Mike Adelberg, thank you so much again for joining us. Look for Mike's article on the Journal of the American Revolution homepage, allthingsliberty.com, and of course, buy his books whenever you see them. Mike, thanks again.
I really enjoyed it. Thanks so much, Brady.